The hard thing about being an executive leader is that your role is almost always bigger than your experience. On the outside, you look successful, title, track record, a smart team around you. But on the inside, it's a different story. You're juggling people problems, endless meetings, and carrying a fear that maybe you're in over your head. And the truth is, you don't need another 27-page strategic plan that no one uses. You don't need to white-knuckle your way through endless meetings. Instead of overcomplicating things, you can reach clarity, alignment, and confidence with a simple 90-day growth plan. And when you do, you'll lead with focus. Your team will pull in the same direction, and you'll finally feel the freedom of enjoying the work that you've worked so hard to get. You know, I learned this lesson that clarity beats complexity every time through some pretty difficult circumstances. And when I think about that lesson, I think about one of my first experiences in the Army as an infantry platoon leader. I was green, brand new, fresh out of West Point. I remember I was in the woods with my platoon of 40 guys, and we got a mission from our commander, and I was so excited because this was my chance. I was going to prove myself. I was going to show how smart I was. And so the mission came down, and I did what I was taught to do in school. I went off in my hooch, and I made the perfect plan, just like I had learned in school. And I remember that when I was finished, the plan was 27 pages long, and I had all kinds of map overlays, and it was in a big binder, and it was perfect. And I remember feeling so confident that I knew what I was doing and that I was ready to do this job. And then I walked over to where my platoon was gathered. We had a few Humvees, and they were standing around waiting for me, the lieutenant, to come and brief them. And then out of nowhere, my platoon sergeant, who was the most senior enlisted man in our platoon, had been in the Army for more than 15 years. He intercepted me and he said, "Sir, what's that in your hand?" I said, "Well, Sergeant, it's my plan. It's my perfect plan. I'm ready to brief the guys." And he said, "No, you're not." And I'll never forget, he grabbed it out of my hand and he threw it in the woods. And I was shocked. It wasn't what I expected. And I didn't have a backup plan. But then he handed me a grease pencil and he pointed to the windshield on the Humvee beside the guys. And he said, "Sir, if you can't draw your plan on the windshield of the Humvee, it's too complicated. And the guys won't be able to remember it and understand it, and we won't be successful." So trusting in, his guidance and his leadership and his experience, I did what he asked. And I remember I took what was in my head from the planning, and I drew circles and arrows and X's and O's, and I briefed a plan. And you know what happened? That night we were successful. As I look back on that experience, it was a good mission. And I was shocked that I didn't need a plan and a binder. I didn't need every detail ironed out. What I needed was a simple plan boldly executed. I needed to trust that my team could take my intent and take my plan and they could run with it and they could work out the details. And that was an important lesson that I've applied throughout my career. I did 8 more years in the Army, including a combat tour in Iraq, and that lesson always served me well. And then later in life, I started a nonprofit from scratch in Cape Town, South Africa, teaching leadership in some of the toughest townships on earth. And in that context, teaching people, I applied that same lesson, that instead of teaching complexity, just be clear and trust people to do the rest of the work. And now in my career for the last 10 plus years teaching and coaching executives, I've seen this applied over and over and over. How when we take complexity and as leaders, we reduce that down into a simple plan and we communicate that with a great deal of clarity and passion, what happens is we equip and we enable others to execute the mission. In my experience coaching and teaching senior leaders in business over the last 10 years, I've seen over and over again this truth that for all of us, our roles are bigger than our experience. But yet we come into our roles and into our teams and we feel the weight that we have to be the ones with the answers. We have to be the ones to figure it out. We're carrying massive responsibility. And we all know that while we look successful and we have the jobs and the titles, the truth is inside our heads are spinning. We have all these plates spinning around us, all these priorities. And what's really hard is to figure out what to do next. What should we prioritize? What should we communicate? How do we take the chaos around us and make sense of it, not just for ourselves, but be able to communicate that in a way that brings clarity to our teams? The typical way I've seen business leaders try to navigate complexity is to work harder, to add more meetings, to involve more people, to write more detailed plans. And then the second part, which is to me the most heartbreaking, is that leaders all think they have to push through it alone. But here's the deal. Complexity kills momentum. What we need is clarity. What we need is simplicity. And what we need is to invite others in, because going solo is not the way to do it. We need to be clear. We need to be simple and invite others to journey with us. If you're listening to this video, maybe you're trying to decide, is this for me? Is the kind of person that you're talking about, Gabe, is that me? And so let me lay out maybe some symptoms of a leader who's caught in a web of complexity. Maybe you have endless meetings, and as you look at your calendar, there's no white space, and you feel like you're getting no traction in your business and maybe even in your life. Maybe for you, it's the symptom is people problems. It's just over and over. You feel like you're solving the same problems and people aren't progressing and growing. Or maybe for you, it's strategy, it's plans. You can't get your hands around the thing that would work and get you and your team and your business unstuck. Or maybe it's tension and misalignment with your leadership team. I see that all the time. No matter what you're facing, I'll guarantee that you're feeling isolated. Leadership can be one of the most lonely places to live. And part of that is that you don't have a safe place to process all of these things, that you need partnership and process to get clear on what to do next. I have never worked with a senior leader, and please hear me on this. I've never worked with a senior leader who did not struggle with imposter syndrome. That deep sense that I'm not enough, that fear that I'm just waiting to be found out by my board, by my peers, by a competitor that I really don't know what I'm doing. We all suffer from it. Maybe you just are trapped by this dynamic that you're busy, but you're not moving forward. And if this is you, if this is describing the symptoms of where you are, I want to tell you something. You're not alone. So many leaders suffer from these symptoms, but here's the deal. There's severe impacts on our life when we don't solve this problem. The truth is that one of the most important things about being a leader is managing our energy. We have finite time, but we really have finite energy, especially the older we get. And when we're living in this dynamic where we don't have clarity and we're just spinning plates and we're just resolving the same problems, it steals our energy, but it also steals our confidence and our ability to show up in a way that is inspirational to other people. And then the other problem is that stress bleeds over into our family life. And maybe you're like me, I remember when I had young kids at home and, I'd have a stressful day, the endless meetings, the problems, all of it. And I'd pull into the driveway and I would always feel terrible because I knew I wasn't bringing my best self into my most important work as a husband and a dad, because that stress bleeds into our family life as well. Or maybe for you, the truth is, that you're always reacting and not in a way that you want to show up, but you just seem to be caught in this swirl that you can't get out of. You're firefighting instead of building, and you long for a way to get out of that. And here's the risk. The truth is, if you continue on this path, the risk is burnout, or maybe just stalling out too young and not reaching your full potential. And maybe you've thought about some of these things, but here's the deal. The stakes are high. And this is a major problem that you have to solve in leadership and in life. Yeah, so here's the question. How do I get this kind of clarity that you're talking about right now, Gabe? And the answer is what I talked about in the beginning. It's a simple 90-day growth plan. And it sounds simple, and it is. And don't forget my Humvee windshield story. It's all about taking complexity and making it simple. And it seems counterintuitive. It seems like there's no way it could be that easy. But, sometimes the most important things in life are actually the simple things. And that's exactly what the 90-day growth plan is all about. And when we begin to get clarity and we began to make intentional plans 90 days at a time, what happens is our confidence grows, our influence grows, our teams get aligned, and they are able to pull together in the same direction. And guess what? People begin to use their superpowers on your team, and you really see potential unlocked. And then for many of us, we see that ripple out just like a pebble thrown into a pond. And we see the effects of that, not just in our work, but at our home, because the truth is we take us with us wherever we go. And so if we make a positive change like this at work towards intentionality and focus and alignment, that has a real potential to ripple throughout our personal lives as well, to reduce stress, to get clear on what's important, to begin to use the resources that are most important, our time and our energy, in the most effective way possible. And that's what this is all about. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, because I'm all about helping leaders experience life and to maximize potential and to see leaders unleashed and unlocked. And when that happens, to see organizations begin to flourish and thrive. And that's what I'm hoping here for you. And that's what we're about to talk about as we explore the 90-day growth plan. I'm so excited to jump into this and walk you through the 90-day growth plan. And you'll notice that even the shape of it is shaped like a Humvee windshield, because that was the inspiration for this. As I was experiencing business leaders who were constantly stuck, as I helped teams navigate lots of complex strategic plans, and I saw that it really didn't work. It wasn't getting the clarity that leaders needed. And so I thought back to that moment in the woods and that very first leadership experience, and I wondered, what would it look like to create a process that would be simple and repeatable, that would take that lesson from the Humvee windshield and apply it in a real way in the business world. And so that's where the 90-day plan came from. So I'm going to walk you through this. And here's the great thing, is that this is something you can do in a notebook. You can do this on a whiteboard. You can do this on a window or a windshield. And you can do it with other people, or you can do this alone to help yourself get clarity. It's a process that just works to help leaders get from stuck to unstuck, from chaos to clarity. There's three main parts of the way this process works. The first part is we're going to define where we are now. And this is what I heard a leader once say, and I can't remember who said it, but I repeat it all the time. And that's the first job of leadership, is to define reality. We have to have a starting point. And I think of leadership always as the metaphor of a journey. I think we're always on a journey. We've never arrived. We're constantly on the way, and we're moving from one milestone to the next on this leadership journey, and we're taking others with us. That's our job as leaders. But if you think about navigating a journey, there's a few things that you have to have, or certainly they're useful to have. The first is a map, and we have a map. But the second thing is you have to know your starting point. If you don't know your starting point, it's really hard to, or if not impossible, to chart your course forward. And yet often we jump to aspirational plans and say, this is where I want to go, or maybe this is where I think my board wants me to go. But what we fail to do is be honest and transparent and vulnerable and say, but you know what, this is where we actually are. And I think the reason that's tough is because it takes courage. Takes courage to be genuine and say, you know what, this is where we really are. This is the real starting point. But that's what we want to do in this first part of the growth map, is we want to be genuine as we name a few different things. We want to name first our pain points. And I use that word pain very intentionally. I think that's actually the most important thing to name up front. What's painful for you right now? And we've gone over several things that might be symptomatic for you, might be painful for you. I'll name a few that have just been painful for me in my journey. And the first one that comes to mind is people. You've heard it said that, man, I'd love this job, or I'd love this company if it weren't for, the people. It's the people that are hard. It's the people that are amazing, but it's the people that are hard sometimes. So one pain point is people. And as you're going through this growth map right now, just take a minute and think about people that might be causing you pain right now. And that doesn't mean they're bad people or anything like that. It just might mean that somebody who's stuck and you can't seem to figure out, but we all have people as a pain point. Maybe for you, it's not a person. Maybe it's just tension on a team. I see that all the time with leadership teams. Is there's just this palpable tension, and sometimes as a leader, you're just tired of it. It's draining your energy, and maybe you don't know like why it's happening, but it's there. And remember, in this stage of the growth map, we're not trying to solve any of these problems. And that's really important because as I've taken lots of leaders and teams through that's a temptation, is to begin to try to solve these problems. No, but right now we're just naming the problem, and it's okay to name the problem. The second difficult thing about naming problems is that we begin to too quickly feel shame and realize like, oh man, I've messed up. This is my fault. Listen, reject that. That's not what we're doing right now. Right now, we're just being honest that, hey, maybe we have a people problem. Maybe we have a tension problem on our team that it's fine if you don't know why it is. That's okay. We're going to get to that later. But you could also have a process problem, and maybe that's just a process that's not working. Maybe it's planning, maybe it's budgeting, maybe it's aligning with another business unit. Whatever it is, there could be processes that that it's not working, and there's a lot of complexity, and I'm not sure how to solve it. But right now, let's just name what is painful for you. And I just want to invite you to answer that question authentically as you think, what's most painful for you right now? And a second piece of that is that maybe for you, it's not just things at work. And here's the thing, we're integrated beings. And especially as leaders, it's important that we name what's painful for us, because it's just you and me right now. This is a safe place. So you can name, maybe it's a personal problem. Maybe it's something in your marriage or with your kids, and it's just painful for you right now. And if you're honest with yourself, that's having a negative ripple effect consequence on your work as well as your personal life. But let's just name all of that here. The second category that we're going to name in addition to pain points is constraints. And I find this particularly useful with larger organizations where maybe there's a large structure above you or beyond your control. And so there's constraints. You feel like you're handcuffed, your hands are tied. Maybe you said, I know what the answer is, Gabe. Like, I think I could figure this thing out, but the larger company or my boss or a different business unit is making decisions, is making my life hard. And the temptation there is to blame and to, talk bad about people. But right now, we don't want to do that. Right now, we just want to name that, hey, there's a constraint here. There's something, a dynamic that's getting in my way that feels like an obstacle. Let's just put that down. Third, we want to name assumptions. And assumptions are things that aren't quite facts, but they're observations that we're going to make. And where we have a lot of assumptions is with people. We see a teammate or a boss or somebody in our relational world behaving in a certain way. And what do? We assign intent to them. We say, you know what, this person's behaving this way because, and then we fill in the blank. And what I want to invite you to do here is to write down assumptions. If something's not a fact that you can verify, but it's an observation that you've made, it's maybe a pain point that you've already named, write down an assumption of, hey, I'm assuming that this person is incompetent. I'm assuming that this circumstance can't change. I'm assuming that my boss won't change his or her mind. And we want to write that down because that's a part of our reality right now. And the last thing we want to name is resources. What is the reality of our resources right now? What do you have available to you? That could be people, that could be financial, that could be time, but like what resources are available to you? And as you move through this thought exercise, here's what I'm hoping, here's what I know, is that you're going to begin to get that clarity that I talked about earlier. This is where you're going to begin to experience it. Because often we have never written down these things. This seems so simple, right? Like just write down what's real for you right now. And often we don't do that. And it just stays this swirling mess of chaos in our life. And this is where we begin to untangle the mess and get clear. So that's step one, is we're going to define where we are right now. The second piece is we're going to begin to name our intentions. And intentions is my way of talking about goals. And, we use the word goals all the time. I changed it on purpose because I think the word intention, I think words matter, and intention is just such a better word. I think we're worn out by goals. Goals feel performative. Goals feel like a lot of expectation, maybe sometimes from somebody else, but an intention, that's something that I'm going to choose. And because here's what I believe about leadership is that as leaders, we have radical agency. What it means to be a leader is to take charge. And the first place we take charge is of our own lives, of our own responsibilities. And we do that through creating intentions. And so the way we're going to create intentions is we're going to take our pain points and our realities that we've named in step one. And I want you to go back and I want you to look for themes there. And I don't know what you're going to find, but I'll tell you some things that people typically find as you look across the realities that you've named. What you're going to see is trends and themes that emerge. Maybe what you see is, there's a people dynamic that's bigger than one person right now. There's a process dynamic that's bigger than this one little thing right now. And what I'm doing in this moment is teaching you a really important leadership skill. And this is what I call the ability to zoom in and zoom out, just like a camera. Leaders have to have the capacity to zoom in and to zoom out at the appropriate time. What do I mean by that? Well, what we did in step one is I invited you to zoom in. I want you to zoom in. I want you to look really in a detailed way about your life and your work and name some realities. What I'm inviting you to do here as we look at intentions in step two is to zoom out and to look at those same realities and say, where do I find themes emerging? And as we find those themes emerging, what we're going to do is we're going to ask the question, what are you going to do about that? What is it that you can do right now? What's an actual step that you can take? What's a goal that you can set that would begin to overcome that reality in your life right now? And again, this is back to agency. This is you leading. This is you naming, hey, we can do something. And I want you to think about maybe some of these problems are really big and they might have multi-steps and it's too big to solve. But here's what I want you to think about as you're creating intentions. What's the next right thing to do as you're finding these themes? What's the next right thing to do? I'll give you an example. You may find as a theme that you just have poor communication in your relational world. Maybe that's on your executive leadership team. You just find like across the board, you look at some of these problems, you say, you know what, this just really feels like poor communication. And so you look at that, you zoom out on that, you name that reality and say, and here's the question, what are you going to do about it? And here's what we want to do. We want to assign a verb, because when we create intentions, these are actions that we're going to take. And so we might say, you know what, I'm going to implement a new communication strategy. I'm going to have a stand-up meeting with my team every Monday, and I'm going to have this particular format that I'm going to invite them into as a way of solving our communication problem. That could be an intention. And as we go through this second phase of creating intentions, we're zooming out, we're looking for themes, we're assigning action words, and we're asking the question, what's the next right thing? And here's a very important caveat to all this, that all of these intentions have to be things that you can actually execute and be successful in the next 90 days. And this is why I don't really believe that annual planning works very well. Because if we say, like, I'm going to do X or Y or Z in the next year, how many of you would say, like, lots of those things fall off the radar? It happens, right? As we get busy, we end up not doing our annual goals. But if we say, hey, in the next 90 days, what can I do to solve my most pressing pain points in my life right now? Boy, there's a gravitas to that right now. And so as you're thinking about these intentions, I want you to think about what can I do in the next 90 days and think about setting goals that are achievable there. Now, you see at the bottom here, we say there's roots and more on that later, but this is, as you're thinking through different intentions, these are just some categories that you might think through. You know, what are some skills that need to be developed? What are some new rhythms that you might need to put in place? Rhythms are really important in leadership. What are the things that you do every Monday? What are the things that you do every month? What are the things you do every quarter? Looking at your rhythms could give you an indication of an intention that you need to set. And the last one is projects. What projects or new initiatives need to be started by you or your team in the next 90 days to solve your most pressing problems? So that's step 2, is creating intentions. And those intentions are, again, flowing out of step number 1. Now, step 3, this is all about motivation, because the role of a leader is to do 3 things: to provide purpose, direction, and motivation. And so what we're doing in steps 1 and 2, we're getting clear, we're providing purpose, right? We're providing direction for ourselves and for others under our authority. But that last piece is really important. If we don't have motivation, then purpose and direction really aren't going to happen. That's just human nature. So how are we going to provide motivation to ourselves and others? Here's what I've learned, is that we need a vision. We need to be able to use our imagination. We have amazing brains. You ever thought about that? Like, your brain is the most powerful thing that you have. It's one of your most powerful weapons. And what we want to do is use our imagination. And I want you to envision, what would your world be like if you actually were successful in completing those intentions that you just named? Think about that for a minute. And really, I would invite you to close your eyes and imagine what your world looks like. Imagine the place that was the most painful in step number 1, but hey, you took agency and you said, I'm going to be intentional and I'm naming things that I can lead through in the next 90 days. And I want you to assume that you're wildly, radically successful in that endeavor. What does your world look like? What has shifted? What does that feel like to lead in that new reality? And if you really do that work and you really use that brain of yours and you really imagine what that's like, man, that's super motivating, because now I've grabbed on to a vision, and now that's the motivation that will pull me through the next 90 days. And I will invite you to take your team through the same exercise. That's the beauty of the 90-day growth plan, is that it's for you personally, and I would invite you to do it for yourself first. Try it out, see if it works. But the second thing is, you see how easy it is. This is a great whiteboard exercise, something you can take others with you on this journey. And when you do this as a group, you can imagine what you get is amazing alignment. And what you get is co-creating a plan together that you can begin to execute. If this has resonated with you and you'd really like some help navigating the 90-day growth plan, just send me an email and I'll send you more information on what that'll look like to walk with you over the next 90 days.